of a stranger, quiet observer, never get too close. I see the world, but it's through this window. Another side to see, I'm ready to know. Not every story's written on a sleeve. Some stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell, emotions we felt, good and the bad in the hands we've been dealt. I wanna know why, I wanna know why you're the way you are. He's from the city, she's from the south. Two different chapters told miles out. Their back row living in his White House. So many stories that I need to know. Not every story's written on a sleeve. Some stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell, emotions we felt, good and the bad in the hands we've been dealt. I wanna know why, I wanna know why you're the way you are. So many stories right in front of me. Some people climb to heights I've never seen. Too many falling down off their feet. These stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell, emotions we felt, good and the bad in the hands we've been dealt. I wanna know why, I wanna know why you're the way you are. Why you're the way you are. Why you're the way you are. Tiptoe around with face of a stranger, quiet observer, never get too close. I see the world, but it's through this window. Another side to see, I'm ready to know. Not every story's written on a sleeve. Some stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell, emotions we felt, good and the bad in the hands we've been dealt. I wanna know why, I wanna know why you're the way you are. He's from the city, she's from the south. Two different chapters told miles out. Their back row living in his White House. So many stories that I need to know. Not every story's written on a sleeve. Some stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell.
Don't kill anybody. That's the main thing. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a show on Tuesday, hosted by me, Tim TK, associate editor at Silverline, and producer/seducer of A Show on Tuesday, writer, creator of Wolf Hunter, writer, co-creator of Secret Project. And I am joined by a very special guest today, Mr. Roland Mann.
What's up? Is that my cue to?
That's you. Yeah.
What's up, everybody? So I am Roland. You usually see me on Sundays, and I write a bunch of stuff. Cat and Mouse, Trumps, the two comics that are this close to fulfillment. Silverline Team Up, featuring Champion and Miss Fury, and Bea #1 are really close to being shipped out. So, they got to be printed first and gotten to me and then shipped out. But they're really close. Thus says the printer. So, and I'm just hanging out on a Tuesday night. Now, I actually thought, Tim, the show was called That Silverline Show on Tuesday. I thought that was the name of it.
I think
but you're saying it's just a show on Tuesday.
I think it's the idea, or a Silverline Show on Tuesday, or a show on Tuesday. Just make it very.
So we kind of believe in it being, whatever you feel like.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right, that works.
we're kind of the cryptid of podcasts. Like whatever you think the show is, it is, and it just exists in this liminal dream space.
Yep.
And of course, I am joined by my constant companion in misery and sorrow, Mr. Quentin Bedwell.
Yes, Quentin Bedwell, penciler, inker. I thought it was a color until I saw Roberta Conroy's work. But I do try. But I'm currently working on a few titles for Silverline, Trumps, and some other stuff. And so
yes, yes, and as you can tell, we are entering into the first month of Halloween, so the decorations are out. And yes, I'm enjoying this season very much already. So speaking of that, we'll double back to today's subject, which is going to be creating to theme. I've actually been diving face first into some horror comics, horror being a theme which I very much enjoy, or a tone, a motif if you're musically inclined. And recently I've just been reading a lot of Hack and Slash, actually, which is kind of anti-horror. It's about the daughter of a slasher, classic 80s horror movie slasher, who goes out and just straight up murders horror movie slasher type villains. So it's they do have some
vigilante
justice.
Yeah.
There's some so they do a lot of classic horror build up. They do a lot of the classic tropes and everything like that. But it's always about this very goth skater looking woman and her sidekick, who's kind of a giant homunculus, going around catching the slasher and stopping them before they can complete the reign of terror. So it's
kind of cool.
It's a fun time.
What a great idea!
Yeah. That is a cool idea.
So before we
what was that called?
Hack and Slash, or just hack
and
slash. So it's hack and then do the slash symbol,
hack
and then
slash.
Yeah.
Who published that?
Let me actually double check that.
Is it new?
It's newer.
I want to say I got a hack slash from DC like a long time ago.
Publishers, Devil's Due, Image, and Dynamite.
Okay.
So, and it's written by Tim Seeley, and so that's how I found about it. It was actually by another Tim. Following him. I
met Tim Seeley just recently.
It's very possible. I think he's actually out in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, I think I did. I'd have to look.
So in terms of horror themed subjects, any sort of media before we delve into the actual subject for tonight, mostly to vamp and kill time. What are some of your go-tos as we get closer to the spooky season, or do you dive in early like I do, or do you prefer to maintain your spookiness for only October?
I usually just wait till October because, well, just because I have kids and my son, he is very, he picks up on stuff. Like he can't go by a graveyard without saying, commenting on all the dead people out there. Look at all that death. So I just, he's 6 years old, so I kind of steer away from it, and, try to explain stuff away for him. So dealing with Halloween this year is going to be a little bit interesting,
Yeah.
because he's thinking a little bit more about stuff and,
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a future goth to me.
Tim's like, no. I mean, Quentin's like, no. You know what? We and I know this may cause some people to mute me. We never have really done Halloween. My wife has always been more of a fall.
Sure.
She would always decorate our front porch with hay bales and corn stalks and rotten corn and things like that.
Girl stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's more of a more sort of it's always kind of more. I felt like it was more country. This is country living kind of. That's kind of what she was trying to do anyway.
Sure.
And for me, I was kind of like, I don't care. Now, I will tell you, I love the idea of scaring people who come who come to my door.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I absolutely love that. As far as media goes, I don't do a lot of horror, mostly because I laugh at too much of it.
Yeah.
I don't find most horror to be horrific. I find most of it to be funny.
Yeah.
And I think that's usually the opposite reaction. When I'm sitting there in a horror and people are going and I'm going ha 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 ha.
Right.
I don't think that's the appropriate reaction.
For me, I almost find that a lot of my friends that we really enjoy watching horror movies here. That's kind of our reaction. Is we like it's so absurd at times that you kind of just have to like laugh, and that's the enjoyment. It's like if you were to have like Hyperion versus Superman. It's so over the top that you just kind of have to laugh through it.
Dude, the fact that you just said Hyperion versus Superman, it just that's insta-cred, man.
I know a comic or two. But if we're going with the girls, like they might be more inclined to jump up and stuff. But when someone gets hit by something, they're like, right in the eye, yeah.
Right. Right.
It's almost like a Dubro level of stoke for it.
Yeah, and for me, a lot of it is like, no, I'm sorry, that's not realistic. That's not going to happen, And I can't, and I know that a lot of fiction is the willing suspension of disbelief, and I think that's a personal problem for me. Is I must be unwilling to suspend my disbelief for a lot of the horror. Yeah. And so when I watch the stuff, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not buying that. No one would do that, So I have a problem. But I will tell you, Charlie Brown. Doesn't Charlie Brown have a the Halloween thing,
the Great Gourd or something like that? Yeah,
the Great Pumpkin.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that one.
Oh, the Robot Chicken parody of Charlie Brown is the Great Gourd.
I was gonna say I don't know that one.
Yeah.
I thought you were just being silly. I'm like the Great Gourd. Yeah, okay.
And the Facebook chat, Tommy Flormonti says Halloween, Christmas, then Thanksgiving in that order for him. Fun.
Wait. He puts Christmas before Thanksgiving?
Yes.
What?
He says fun, good food, more good food.
Yeah. How does he do that?
I think I'm kind of in the same way. I think Tommy and I are mostly just the same person, just in different generations.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know he loves Halloween.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're getting stoked on that.
Yeah. I used to when I was a kid. I used to have an RCA record that that my dad would put in the front window, because in Mississippi it was always coolish.
Yeah.
By Halloween, it wasn't cold, but it was always coolish. So he would put the speakers of the stereo in the front window, and then he would turn and this the record was sounds, chains and stuff like
Yes.
that. I always loved that. I'm like, okay, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah. We when it actually comes to we depending on how dark it's getting, because in Oregon either it stays brighter oddly later, or it just gets dark all of a sudden out of nowhere. So depending on safety driving into our parking pad, we do change out the lights with these kind of like blood red maroon lights, and
Cool.
kind of put up like a fake blood moon in the window,
That's cool.
and try to find some way to make like a clinking sound. We actually started using actual chains like 2 years ago.
Oh, cool. I was gonna say one thing you can always just get a little small oscillating fan.
Oh
and attach something to the as it
Yes.
oscillates, and then it'll make some kind of clinking sound.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We have a neighbor down the road that I don't think they do it this early. This is a little bit early, but usually the 1st of October they'll do a little bit of what you do, but they just have they've got 2 bulbs on either side of their door, and they just swap those out with red bulbs.
Nice.
So, and I used to I like to walk at night because I can't stand walking in 90-degree sun, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you walk by that and you're like, ooh, that is kind of creepy.
Yeah. Silly. Especially since like our house is done New England style, which is kind of weird to find out in Oregon, but it's a section of townhouses, kind of like brownstones, just cordoned off in a behind like rows of trees.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't look like an alley, but you just like turn to the right and you see like all these trees and like piles of dead leaves, and then red lights descending on a makeshift graveyard to create in the front.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
is it appropriate? Go ahead, Quinn.
oh,
Gonna say my brother, he doesn't really decorate, but what they do is every weekend, as one normally would watch a movie, they always watch during the month of October all scary movies all month long. Every time they watch a movie, it's a scary movie. And I tried to do that, but I just don't. I have only so much time to watch a movie. I do during Christmas, I think it's 6 or 7 Christmas movies that I have to watch. I tried to do it for Halloween. I just couldn't do it.
nice.
Just didn't have time. I didn't make time.
I normally take the entire week of Halloween off.
Wow, really?
Yes, I could.
Like your Christmas, huh?
Yeah,
Wow.
I couldn't this year, just due to scheduling other people in my department. My department is 2 people at work, so when one of us isn't there, the other one needs to be there. But normally take that entire week off, and my mandatory movies are the Nightmare Before Christmas, which I watch on Halloween and at Christmas, and Halloween Town, oddly enough, but because it's filmed in St. Helens, Oregon, so the town of St. Helens also will recreate the entire set. So if you drive up there, you can walk through everything.
It's cool. I love stuff like that.
And then also the Alien franchise, maybe Hellraiser. We'll also go through, of course, like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, kind of the classics. And then we'll see what new stuff has come out. It's usually hit or miss. Not everyone can recapture like the classic like horror formula. Because I feel like late 80s, that was like how Marvel had the movie formula down pat. That's how late 80s had the horror movie formula. And some things are kind of lost in time, but every now and then you do find a gem.
Yeah.
Yeah, we thought we'd found a good one year. We all got together and watched Babadook. Some people actually absolutely love that movie, but I was just like, it was so annoying to me. Some parts were really genuinely scary.
Yeah.
But never even heard of it.
It's based off of like an actual like children's tale where and like the I can't remember where the Babadook's from is, if it's like Romani or Georgian or something like that. But
Okay.
yeah. And so I think that's where a lot of people kind of got lost in it. It was probably the fact that it felt like it was kind of reciting the story a bit too much, or
It's really good, Roland. Watch it. You should watch it.
Well,
Forget
so-
what I said before.
So here's the thing. My wife cannot stand horror movies. She doesn't now. We're different. She doesn't like them because it literally gives her nightmares. She's like,
Yeah.
no, I can't watch those because they do scare her. Maybe not in the movies, but they'll plant these images, and so she's like, no, I she used to
Yeah.
watch them, but she says she doesn't watch them anymore. So I will watch some occasionally with my son. We'll go, we'll watch something. I'm like, oh, this is one that you need to see just because it's a classic and you
Yeah.
need to have seen it, whether you like it or not. You need to have seen it.
Right.
But no, what I was going to ask is, so is it appropriate to tell some ghost stories right now then, or is that a later?
Oh, I mean,
Do it.
honestly, yeah, we could. Yeah, we could kind of use this as our first bit here, as defining what a theme is and giving examples, and then we'll get into how you create to that. But
That's what we do on
Yes.
here. We talk about what we want to,
Exactly.
and we fit it into
exactly, we exist in
our
the,
context.
the Tuesday show exists in translucent liminal space. It is what you perceive
Yep.
it to be.
So
Yep.
so I have a family story that's been passed down, and then I have a story that happened to me. Now I should preface this with I don't really believe in ghosts, but
But
when
here's
I
a good
was
story.
in ninth grade, maybe eighth grade, probably eighth grade, I played on a ball team, and so I was one of the young. It was a high school team. I was one of the youngest, and one of the other players was my friend, same age as me. Well, he had two brothers on the team, and one of them was a senior, and the other one was in between them somewhere, right? Well, they had this farm area up on this hill, because I kind of lived out in the suburban boonies, right? And so we had a camp out one time, and there was about, I don't know, 6 or 8 of us, something like that. And we went to their house, and then we drove back in the woods, right? I'm talking, it's all woods. We drove back in there, and suddenly we come upon this tiny little chapel, right? And like in the middle of nowhere. And then there's this little graveyard about the same size as the chapel just beside it. Now this graveyard is completely fenced in, with a little white picket fence about shin high. It's the kind of thing you could walk up to it and step over it, to get inside. But it had this little archway where it wanted you to go in. So it sat there. The archway was there, and the church sat right beside it. So you're kind of looking at, the door to heaven, the door to hell, right?
Mhm.
And so we camp out just in front of it, not in the graveyard, but out in front of it. We're probably 30 yards away from the church doors and the graveyard entrance, and just have a good time. Having a good time out there, playing games and stuff like that. My friend, we have a sleeping bag. My friend takes an off can, and he goes, "Watch this." And I had never seen this before. He throws it in the fire. Right now, for those of you who don't, like me, who didn't know what it would do, that thing blew up, right? I'm talking explosion blew up. Sparks went everywhere,
Airsoft
got on our
can.
sleeping bags, and I my until I threw my sleeping bag away, it still had little burn spots on it where ashes were. So he and I were kind of all the older ones kind of got mad at us, right? And so we kind of settled down. I'm telling a long story to get there, right? So we kind of settled down, and everybody now they had a little dog with them, okay? And I'm talking about like a little terrier-sized dog, right? Not a big dog. And it was a Smiths is who it was. It was a Smiths dog. And probably 2:00 at night, we're all laid down, mostly asleep, and suddenly that dog goes, starts growling, right? And of course, it wakes us up. So we look over, and the dog is looking at the graveyard, right? And so we're looking over at the graveyard. We don't see nothing, right? And suddenly the dog gets up and walks about halfway from us to the graveyard. It's like, "Arr, arr, arr, arr." He walks then, growling more and more up to the entrance, stops just short of the entrance. Is like, "Arr, arr, 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 arr," just starts barking. Of course, the hair on the back of my neck is dead because we don't see a thing, right? and barks, and then he just stops, and then he walks about halfway back and goes, "Arr, arr, arr." We all pick up our sleeping bags and pile in the car.
Nope.
You know, it could
Yeah.
have been a raccoon, it could have been a pot. No, we never saw anything,
Mhm.
but the fact that he was barking the way he was barking, looking
Yeah.
in that cemetery,
Mhm.
was just too creepy for us to stay there. So we all piled in the car and slept in the car.
Oh yeah.
That was probably a smart thing to do, because even if it wouldn't have been anything, out of this world, even if it was something in this world, I mean, that could tear you up.
Right? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could have been in some kind of panther. Anything. But yeah, it was still creepy.
Yeah.
So
I know you said you don't necessarily believe in ghosts, but
yeah, right.
I know we have talked about this on the Wednesday show before. Tommy, Dean, and I are at least in the area where we're willing to believe and would entertain the idea of going ghost hunting.
I would love to go ghost
Yeah.
hunting.
So we're
Yeah.
trying to figure out what con would be in the middle of all of us to facilitate a con trip / finding a nearby haunted hotel or something.
Well, I can give you a couple of ideas. Savannah Comic Con. Go down to Savannah, Georgia. They have got quite a few ghost tours down in that area. Matter of fact, I think in kind of downtown Savannah. And then the other one would be New Orleans. Of course, right now is not a good time to go to New Orleans.
Yes.
But New Orleans, I think it's
yeah.
a wizard show that's there now.
Yeah, and New Orleans and their relationship with the macabre and the supernatural is very.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Find Bon
So-
Swamp D dancing for you.
Yeah. So I would absolutely go.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
Maybe.
So my other story, I want to tell you my other story, right? So
Yes.
my other story is my family story. It's the one that's been passed down, right? So anybody who knows me talked about my family has always heard me say, I come from a long line of farmers, and that's pretty much what we do. My family, you know much about farming. There's hill farms, and then there's bottomland farms. Well, my family was not rich enough to own the bottomlands, which is the good land. So my family was all hill farmers, right? And the story I'm about to tell, all of this is still there today, with the exception of the house. Okay, so much of my family is buried in a little cemetery called Gravel Hill Cemetery, and the church nearby is Gravel Hill Baptist Church. It might be Gravel Hill Southern Baptist Church, not Southern Baptist, a General Baptist Church. I'm not real sure about that. My dad's farm is 2 miles from it, so I pass by it kind of when I go out there to visit. That's where we go out and shoot guns when we go to visit. So one of my dad's uncles, they used to have a house right on the edge of the cemetery. Okay, and I'm talking cemetery butted up to their property. Okay, the house is no longer there. The empty lot where the house is still there though, so you can say that's where the house was, right? My dad's uncle and the whole family, they swore, every one of them, now it wasn't just one family member, they had a back door that did not matter what they did to it. If they would leave or they would go to sleep at night, they always found it cracked open the next morning. They could lock it, they could bolt it, they could put cans in front of it, they could put all kinds of stuff on one side of it, but the next morning it always, or when they returned, it was always open, just a crack, when they woke up. And my uncle, my dad's uncle, was deathly afraid of ghosts. He swore it was ghosts coming in the house. He would not leave, because they were right next to the cemetery. He would not leave his house after it got dark because he was afraid of the Haints. The Haints would come and get him. And that's a family story that's been passed down about that house. And of course, the house is no longer there.
Yeah.
It's gone a long time. But I never saw it. I was not old enough. I don't even remember a house being there. It might have been there when I was little, but I don't ever remember a house being there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a family horror story, ghost story, I guess, not a horror story.
Yeah. I think. I do have one much similar to yours, Roland. Your first one. Which, if anyone has experience with this, you probably also share the experience that if you ever want to see a ghost, just go to a church, any church after dark. That's the most haunted place on earth.
Especially if there's a graveyard.
Oh, yeah.
attached.
There wasn't any graveyard attached to this one, but my cousin was the nighttime janitor at one, so often he'd allow us to, come over, we'd hang out, get Taco Bell, just kind of play cards or Magic or whatever, just kind of mess around. And it was created you had the central chapel, and then it was in an L shape from there. You had two wings. One of those wings was much better illuminated. It was facing a big parking lot, so it had streetlights coming in it. The other one had no illumination at all, and was facing an open field, and it had big glass doors on the other end of the at the far end of the hallway. So it wasn't just double push doors, straight up ground to ceiling glass doors.
Right.
And some context going into this. In common Irish beliefs and also some other European beliefs, which if you have strong Irish families, these get passed down. Cats are the guides to spirits needing to pass on. That's why cats will stop and stare at something. They'll see a spirit and they'll walk around wherever is and they're leading the spirit where he needs to go. If anyone's interested, you can look up the story of Panger Bon and St. Patrick.
So when I'm throwing stuff at cats and running them off, I'm really messing some guy up.
Yeah, you're stranding someone in purgatory.
Oh man,
No, if you feel bad.
I'll think twice now.
Yeah. So, but we'd helped him do some stuff in the main wing, and he needed to go finish up just locking up the far wing. So we follow him over there, and again we enter. So it's completely closed off. So when you're actually near the chapel, you can't see anything at wing. Just two large wooden doors. You have to open those to get through. And normally there's a little kickstand that you can kick down and push it to the side.
Yeah, right.
So we enter, and I'm pretty sure my friend Boone does that because the door does not close immediately behind us as we enter in. So we're fairly certain he's at the kickstand at this point. When we make our way through the wing, and at this point the only exterior facing window is the far one. Everything else is just doors into more dark unilluminated rooms, so it's already a little eerie. You can hear the wind rustling against the door at the far end, so we're pulling them closed, locking them all. We get to the last two doors, and it's been silent. There's been no movement. It's just been us in there. We pull those closed, we lock them, and we as we turn, we notice that standing outside of the glass door is a pair of cats just looking at us. And then the doors that we're fairly certain that Boone put the stand on just slam shut.
Whoa!
So we're having none of this. So we just book it back out and just try to shoulder check our way through the doors. If a ghost got it, maybe they didn't prop it. I don't know. But yeah, that was. Maybe it's been the wind or something pulling on the door. He probably not got it, but at that moment we did not care.
Right.
just Nana told us that cats guide your souls to the afterlife. There's two of them there, and the door is slammed shut.
But I think that's a fantastic illustration of the power of suggestion in the mind.
Oh yeah.
Because you didn't see anything, right? And again, I didn't see anything.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, the things that I could imagine,
Yes.
right, were just terrifying. And yeah, so that's to me, I think that's an incredible demonstration of that.
Yeah.
Well, I, on the other hand, I absolutely, totally believe in ghosts,
Okay.
and I won't lay out all the reasons why, but yeah, I absolutely believe that they're there. I just don't pay attention a lot of times, but yeah, because I've had several things happen to me, and not only that, but just stuff in my family, and also another thing that's always kind of irked me is, Ouija boards and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Used to be able to buy those at, Toys R Us, and you can buy them. I think you can buy them at Walmart even now.
Yes.
And man, let me tell you, I've had experience with Ouija boards when I was younger. That is not a toy. And anybody who thinks it's a toy, you should probably not be messing with anything like you do not know what you're messing with, because I'm telling you, I can firsthand knowledge. Now, don't go try it just because I'm saying this. I'm just saying you don't need to be fooling with that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Those have always scared me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not too.
I've had multiple encounters.
If it's a traditional one, I am not touching it. But the Walmart ones, I just kind of chuckle by because you just see the big old like Hasbro sticker on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, that's all right.
Yeah, you're getting the discount ghost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're gonna
Ghost made in Bangladesh.
You're gonna conjure the ghost of Sam Walton, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like the LaCroix equivalent of a ghost. It's just kind of sparkling and staticky. The flavor is kind of there, but.
That's funny.
All right. Well, we are talking about creating to theme tonight, and we took the first half hour there to kind of talk a bit, but also explore some themes that are going to be much more prevalent in your Netflix recommended for the next couple of weeks, and that is horror. And so we're going to be Tommy, every experience I've had with the Ouija board was me. Sorry, everyone. That would be Tommy, just the guy who was the one who is forcing it.
Yeah. And if you're with Tommy, you're like, why is this Ouija board spelling boobs?
Exactly. Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about creating to theme. And Roland mentioned two things from a writer's perspective when it comes to creating to theme that I'll bring up maybe when we need to get some narrowed down a little bit. But so creating the theme, not just horror, could be any theme, but if you want to keep it on horror, absolutely. I don't know how much experience either of you have creating horror. I have managed to actually sell a couple horror short stories, so I'm proud of those.
Cool.
So creating to theme, this could be, action adventure, horror, romance, slice of life. How do you think your approach differs? Don't necessarily have to go in detail with each one, but is that something you make a conscious detail out in, like your planning or your creative process?
Quentin, you can go first.
Usually my stuff is birthed from just like an image, or I don't know, it could be anything that just kind of strikes me, and then it kind of already has the theme with the idea that comes with it. And there have been some times when I've thought of stories and stuff that had multiple aspects, not just one. They went from fantasy into fantasy horror, just so because I do like horror comics and horror stuff. I just really love to draw horror type stuff. When I was growing up, we had the old black and white Frankenstein, which there was other movies around, Freddy Krueger and all that stuff, but the classics were always fun, Dracula and all that. I've always loved drawing that kind of stuff. So I try to, in my own stuff, do what I'm interested in. That way I know I'll stick with it, because, sometimes you can get sidetracked doing other stuff, other people's stuff, and just working in general, So usually the theme comes with it whenever something comes to me, I remember Stephen King talking one time, I forget, that it was one of the movies that he had, and he said the starting idea of it is he was going down the road somewhere, and he just started thinking of this guy sitting in a jail cell, and he just kept on, the vision that he kept on having was just this guy sitting in the jail cell looking forward. and it was just like a very ominous vision, that was in his head, and he just kept on thinking about it. And every time he thought of this, the story just started coming more and more. And it ended up being, I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was where they had caught this guy, and he knew a lot of different stuff about different people in the town. They put him in jail, and like he knew intimate things about him and was trying to turn them against each other. By the end of the movie, he like has to take one of their children or something, or they'll all disappear, like Roanoke Island or Colony. Anybody remember this at all?
Sounds
The movie?
familiar.
No.
The movie? Well, anyway, I thought that was an interesting way that he came up on that story. It just kind of started with that one, seed, and it just grew into, how Stephen King movies are. They're like 2.5 hours long,
Mm-hmm.
and or more,
Oh, and real quick, Tommy Flormonti, as spelt out as he would, show your boobs.
Yeah.
Yes, but Martin Piero does also bring up a good point. Is horror a theme or a genre? Couldn't you have a horror story where the theme is, I don't know, man versus machine? And yes, literarily, classically in literary circles, horror would be a genre, not a theme. But in the this is using theme in terms of the broader creative sense, in the same way you would relate it with motif, in that it is simply a repeated idea or a aspect, state of mind that you are trying to achieve. So while you could have a theme, which is the through line of a literary work, this is the same theme that you would say if you're tying all things in your house together. You'd say that you are having a modernist themed house if you're doing a bunch of black and white square furniture or things like that. So this is the idea of a repeated idea or a single motif, because we can use this to also say hitting the themes or the color palettes you want to use as an artist, such as Quentin is. So, for instance, I am working on some dudes for a tabletop war game where my theme is 80s neopop, so I'm using a bunch of bright, vibrant, like neon colors. So my theme is neopop, even though the genre that it's in is fantasy, but the repeated idea that I'm working towards is that. So we're talking about how you would approach something, knowing that, okay, this is an idea that I'm trying to repeat and hit again and again, and then, and oftentimes the theme is something that your editor or publicist says, like, hey, this is how you're going to market the book, because I figured this out. And he was the writer, like, yeah, sure, it sounds like something I thought up.
Yeah, I think for me, most of the writing that I do, it tends to be self-generated, and so I don't often say this is going to be the theme that I'm going to write about. What happens is I start writing, and as is often the case, the characters begin to take on a life of their own. The setting begins to happen, and then I begin to see the themes in the work. And then if I'm being smart at the time, which I'm not always being smart at the time, I'll try to capitalize on those and say, okay, well, this is a kind of a natural theme that is going with this story, to let me kind of take that and build upon it.
Yeah.
But I don't normally start off saying, well, okay, I'm going to write a story that has a theme of this. Now I will tell you, I have over the span of some of my writing, I have seen themes that were in my work that I'm like, I didn't realize I wrote those kinds of stories,
Right.
And I don't normally talk about them because I want others to find it and not me to say, oh, I'm writing about themes of this, man, and blah blah blah. I don't want to do that. For me, it's like, hey, look, I want you to enjoy my stories. I want you to read them and have fun and come back for the next one. But I do, in hindsight is 2020, and then looking back on a bunch of the stuff that I've written, I'm like, I can see kind of patterns of themes in my work that it wasn't intentional. I didn't set out to do.
Yeah. From my perspective, I do kind of the same thing where I will, like, my initial development, I always write to concept first. That's kind of the idea where, like, I mentioned earlier, my most recently published short story is called The Vessel. Is it the Black Sea? Yeah. And so my initial concept was, what if there's a spaceship at the bottom of the Black Sea? Because I think at the time I was writing it, we were still trying to map out everything there because it's really hard to take images of the bottom of the Black Sea.
Right.
Because everything's so salt dense, stuff just kind of dies in there. So I did all my pre-writing to concept, just kind of thinking of, like, what would be cool with aliens or whatever in that, and it's kind of jumped to mind of the Lovecraft style, like, madness, where you can be driven mad by something without being in direct contact by it. And so I'm like, oh, it's got some sort of radio signal, and so I end up creating the genre from there. But in terms of, like, that the classical creative freedom of the theme or the motif, the thing I kept on wanting to go back to was weird stuff happening. There's an alien ship at the bottom of the sea. That's really hard to map. That's affecting people in ways they can't see. So it's just weird, unseen things are happening. This man is driven to such levels of insanity that he gets an experimental submersible craft, goes down, tries to, like, find this thing, get into it, but the pressure at the bottom of the sea is so much so that it would, causes, like, he wouldn't be able to survive at the bottom of it. So, but it's also not the same as, like, going to the bottom of the ocean where you just kind of get crushed immediately. It's the slow, painful thing, but it doesn't matter because he's wanting to be next to this thing that's in his head. And so then the literary theme that come out, I'm like, oh, this is about obsession.
Yeah.
And so, like, by the time I've actually finished the first or second draft, I get the theme of it.
Yeah. But
the motif that I keep on, but it's more about just creating the motif, and so writing that was very much just about doing I forgot what the opposite of deduction is. It is induction. I mean, where you start small and work your way out big. Because deduction is when you take the big picture and work your way yourself in small, and that's why some people were like, Sherlock Holmes doesn't really deduce all the time, even though he says that's his thing. A lot of times he...
I'm Googling it.
Yes. We have technology.
Yeah. What is the opposite of deduction? Gives me a whole list of words.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
And then it tells me I can also look at a thesaurus. No, opposite of the
Sources are good, but at the same time, sometimes they can give you the wrong.
According to livescience.com, inductive reasoning is the opposite of deductive reasoning, so it is induction.
Okay.
Yeah, which makes sense. So yeah, starting kind of you don't get the big picture until you've put together all the smaller pictures together. So just finding all those little things to, like, bounce back to my core motif. Whereas writing Wolf Hunter, that was all much more deductive in the way we went about it, as we kind of talked about in the pre-show, where AJ and I had to have, like, a powwow before we got down to anything, because, it's historical fiction. A lot of this stuff actually happened, and we're just telling the secret history that got abridged in the notes. And even
if your story is fiction, you want the world surrounding it to be believable and
Exactly,
realistic. Yeah.
So we had to. We already had all the big picture stuff together, so we had to go from this idea of, matching the history, and then work our way back down to like, okay, this is what's going to happen at this moment of time. But it was kind of the opposite thought process or opposite creative process, where instead of everything coming from the outline necessarily, a lot of it came from the already present story, and then just distilling an outline from that.
Yeah.
I
And,
think, oh, go ahead.
No. You go ahead, sir.
I think one of the biggest things with me is it sounds kind of like y'all are the same way too. You kind of do something that's cool, like a story that's cool. I think some people, that when they start, it's not really. They start a story with, what do I want to say? What do I want this story? How do I want? They start there. They're already talking about message in their head, and you see that a lot today. People just trying to pass a message to somebody subliminally. Hey, it's not subliminal anymore, okay, guys? You do it a little too much.
No.
Whereas I think, when I think of something, it's more, wow, this would be a cool story, if I did this and did this thing and did this other thing. I'm thinking story driven, and they're thinking message driven, and then they try to build a story or a theme around it, and throw it in some genre. Hey, what'll sell, or what's everybody interested in right now? And I just don't make stories that way. And if a message comes out, or if I can throw something in there, that's great. But mine is just strictly entertainment. It's not trying to teach anybody or beat them on the head or judge them. You know what I'm saying? Or virtue signal or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I think message first works great if you're writing like slam poetry, because that's expected.
Or sermons.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that was what I kind of based a lot of how I approach story concepts now is there's a Stan Lee quote where he's talking about where he got a lot of his like weird ideas and everything. He's like, I just wrote what was cool to me, because if I liked it, someone else has to like it.
Right. Yeah. And that's it. I think you gotta, you talk about, your story about the spaceship at the bottom of the ocean. Or, I'm sorry, at the bottom of the Black Sea. Is that you come up with something that's cool, a concept or a character or an idea for this thing to happen, and as you build it, then you build the world around it. Yeah. And but it's only after you kind of. I don't think anyway. I don't know that you can start necessarily. Well, I shouldn't say you can't. Someone might be able to. I don't start with a theme to say, hey, I'm going to write, a story about guilt. Yeah. But again, I think what happens is you can, like you said, you realize yours was about obsession. Is that once you realize that, once you can kind of see what it is, then you can go back and in your revisions,
and work on that.
Yeah, you can embolden that. You can say, "Oh, okay, I see what I'm doing with with my story now. I see that this is the thing that works," and you can go back and add those things in and work to strengthen that.
See, that to me is organic. That's organic. Mm-hmm. That's the way that's entertaining. That's organic. That's the way I feel. And hey, I'm no expert, but that's the way I think it should be done. Unless you're making a sermon of some sort, I don't think you should come up with a message first and then come up with your story. I think it's to me, that's kind of disingenuous. Here, I'm going to sit here through your movie or your comic and, find out at the end that this whole time this has been you, working me up with a good story to drop a load of junk on me. Yep.
That's
that I don't subscribe to or believe in, or maybe I do.
Right.
But you've just tipped your hand, and now I see that now I'm just out of it. The immersion's gone. I'm no longer entertained because
to me,
I feel like you're selling me something.
It's almost more insulting when it comes when like the message gets like emboldened, like it's very clear, and you realize like, oh, this is just selling. But it's something you believe in yourself because you're like, I could do this so much better. Like,
Yeah.
where's my money?
Yeah. I could do this so much better. I could disguise this in a way that no one would realize that they're,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
one of the things I think that a lot of independent comics, because 99.999% of what I read now is independent comics. Or if I'm reading Marvel or DC, it's older stuff. And the problem I see with a lot of independent comics is story. And I think it's because kind of what we've talked about here tonight is that they've got a cool idea or a cool concept or a cool character, but they don't, and then they just go, right? Oh, look, this is a cool character. What's he doing? Well, he's doing this. Oh, okay, that's cool. Go.
Yeah.
That's not a story, know? And so they fail to take that thing that excites them initially and craft it into a story that's going to get the rest of it excited, They just, and it might be cool. Again, it might be cool, but it's just like, okay, where's the story behind it?
Yes. I can't remember if I got this from your class or not, actually, but the idea of, I like doing a lot of front work because it means the work on the end is going to be much more minimal.
Yeah,
that's why I'm very much a planner. Like, I'm very planny, especially with the secret project, which I sent you the outline to that one. I feel like is very.
It's actually open on my computer so that it reminds me every day. This is a top priority thing. You need to read this now.
I do.
So I can point to it right. I can start reading it if you want me to.
Issue 1, scene 1. But I did that in a way that I don't think many people would break down a comic. But I wanted to do for this one because, for people who know me, I am very historically minded regarding a certain influence in this. And I also am very much a hard sci-fi head. And so when I'm combining these two things, I want to hit them together very well. And so I hit it in like movie scene format, which for a comic is kind of weird, but that's the way it allowed me to like really parse out, like, this is what's going to happen.
But I absolutely love it because one of the things I looked at, because I kind of scrolled through it, and one of the things I looked at, I'm like, okay, cool. It's kind of like, not exactly, but it's kind of like what I do, Tim, is because now what you'll be able to do, once you get it kind of figured out, you'll be able to say, okay, I got 22 pages for this issue, right? And I know your first issue has 9 scenes. So you're going to be able to go, okay, I want 2 pages for this one, 3 pages for this one, 4 pages. And then you'll get your total and you're going to go, oh, crap, I've got 32 pages here. Roland will never let me have 32 pages. So what have I got to cut, right?
Yes, exactly,
And you can say, okay, I could probably do this in 2 instead of 3. And, I don't really need 8 pages for this. I could probably, and you can work it down. But you still get to, and I'll tell you, I will be, and you might be able to tell because how excited I get. I love this part of comic book writing, because you're really kind of taking the puzzle pieces and shaping them. You're not just placing them where they go. You're kind of shaping them so that you can place them.
Yeah, and it's that thing where we had I had the concept in mind, and then I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. It very clearly lends itself to one particular genre over any other. But the and by the end of it, I kind of got an idea for some themes, and then I went back and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make some changes now to each issue, or like change a few scenes here and there to like kind of match this idea of, okay, by the end of it, what's the hero going to learn, and what do we as the audience learn about the hero? And
I love that you have them all titled too. I don't ever do that. I don't. My titles, I kid you not. The titles of my issues do not come until I've written the whole thing. And I'm like, okay, what is this?
I once I got to the end of it, that's when I got the idea for the titles, and I'm sure you've already noticed the theme or the motif in them.
Yes.
or I'm like, I could take a very well-known book in Western mindset, and mix it with some like an ancient Roman prophecy, and kind of combine the two to create the naming structure.
People out there going, man, I wish they wouldn't do that. But they're talking about this cool project, and they won't even tell us what it is. They're speaking in code.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's the issue where you want to be educational. Like, obviously want more people to get into writing comics because it's amazing. And,
It is.
But also, we want to sell comics, and spoiling is bad for selling.
Yes, it is. Like, I know that story. I don't need to
You
buy
get
it.
that information in the Patreon.
Exactly.
You
Yes.
subscribe to the Patreon, and
Yeah.
you get the insider information.
Yes. If you
Yeah.
find me on the street and give me $5, I will tell you everything.
Or give Tim $5.
Yes. You can
That's writer pay right there.
exactly. Yeah. You get the verbal issue.
Well,
Mark,
you no longer have to sell them the comic if you make the $5. So
Martin Piero says many of my stories begin with the question, "How do I want the reader to feel when he or she puts down my book?" And I don't even know if I also think about that question, but I don't think I have that for when I'm creating an individual project. I think that's my career in general. Where like,
well, I think I'm well into it
Yeah.
by that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm well into it, and I've got my theme and everything, worked out by then.
I almost think, and I'm not sure that I know Martin well enough that I'm not sure this is what he's saying, but I don't think that for me, I don't write a comic to think, oh, I want you to feel this way after you read this story, and I want you to feel this way after you read this story, or this way. You know what I'm saying? I think for me, I want you to get to the end and close the book and say, I enjoyed that.
yes. Yeah.
On whatever
really good
level.
movie. That was
Yeah.
a really good story.
Yes.
Really good comic.
I'd like to. I would buy the second issue if it was available.
Yeah. I try not to think about the general audience for whenever I'm writing something because my audience is always going to be me because I know there are people who have the same taste I do. So I write to me. But in terms of my career, I've said this multiple times. My ultimate goal, my career goal, how I want my writing to impact the world, how I want my stories to impact the world, is I just want some kid to find my book in a dingy corner of the school library, sit down with it, and miss the class bell. That's my measure for success.
So, true story here, and I wish this was an original work of mine. Okay, but when Brett was probably in fourth grade, maybe third grade, something like that. I don't remember exactly which grade it was. I had just finished the adaptation of Huckleberry Finn, and he wanted to donate a copy to his library, right? Because my dad did a comic book, right? And so I gave him a copy, donated it to the library. About 2 weeks later, he was bummed. I'm like, "What's wrong?" He's like, "Well, nobody's reading your comic," and I'm like, I'm sorry, there's lots of books in there. And, he says, no, but I tell them about it and they look at it. None of them read it. And so I called the librarian and I said, hey, here's what's going on, blah, blah, blah. She goes, oh, I know exactly why they're not reading it. And I said, why? She said, because it has no AR point value. Now, if you don't know what that is, if you haven't been in school in a while, AR stands for accelerated reading, in which all books are assigned a point value based on their kind of reading difficulty level. And students have a certain point value, a certain number of points that they have to get every semester or session or quarter or whatever it is.
They have parties. AR parties.
It had 0 points. And she said no one's reading it because they don't get any points for it. And so I true story, I asked her, I said, well, how can we make that happen? What do you need? She said, can you write up a test for it? And I said, sure. She said, you write up a 10-question test about the book. I'll put it in there. We'll assign points to it, and then we'll see what happens. And so I did. And about a month later, Brett came back and he said, can we donate another one? And I said, why? He goes, because the one the other one you donated is falling apart now. It had been read so many times because it had a point value. And of course that made him happy. And of course that, made me happy too.
Yeah.
But it was like, man, it's Huckleberry Finn. Why can't it be an original one, right?
Yeah.
The worst thing about that program is that they stop at grade. Oh, I can't remember what grade it is, but it's very low grade. And I think they should keep that program.
Yeah, because I think when I got into high school, the program would no longer apply to anything. But
that may be in some cases, but I know my daughter was on it until she was a senior.
Yeah, I might vary state by state, but yeah, I think yeah, it is weird putting the. Well, I mean, also I imagine if you had a publisher, they would probably write the test for you.
Yes.
But
I know it was published by an Indian company.
huh?
So I didn't actually do it.
Interesting.
It was published by Campfire.
Oh, Campfire. Yeah.
Campfire Kids.
Yes.
I did
Yeah.
two books for them. So,
But yeah. I feel like they need to have several people dedicated just to test writing, though, with how much they
Yes.
use.
yeah,
Yeah. But I think programs like that that's what got me into Tolkien, was the fact that The Hobbit was on there. And
Really?
Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah.
So see, we loved it when they were younger,
Mhm.
but when they got older, and of course I say this because my son could have used it. I don't think he did not have it here as he was a senior, and we're in Florida here.
Yeah.
But my daughter had it all the way to a senior. But our problem was she was reading all the time, and she was reading. But the problem is that she was reading stuff that wasn't necessarily in the library, and they wouldn't give her credit for any of that.
Yeah.
And so we're like, come on, she's already reading above most of your other. Because I can't remember exactly. I think she graduated like third or fourth in her class.
Yeah.
Pretty high. But we couldn't. We were talking to the teachers and like, yeah, we know, but this is a requirement. I'm like, come on, she's reading these books, and this is a program that's great for students who don't normally read. But we're talking about my daughter. Like I said, my son could have used it, right? But she didn't need it, and so yeah, that was frustrating.
Yeah. Stephen Brown on YouTube. It says, I think a good story would focus on adventure, but won't take away from mystery of the character. I hope that made sense. Yeah, that does make sense. I think we talked about this a bit last week when we talked about creating characters kind of from types or archetypes and all that stuff. Like, your characters still need to be genuine. Like, you can't, that's the whole thing where if you necessarily go from like your theme first, your characters may have to break their character in order to follow that theme all the way through. And that's where you get, a lot of issues people have where, Marvel's been around for however long, so is DC. So, like, we have well-established characters, but the same themes aren't necessarily as relevant as they were, like, 60 years ago.
Right.
So, like, you're going to have to, like, find some really interesting ways to reinvent characters to have them match the story that's being told. And sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
And
the challenge for that is how do you do that without drastically changing the character?
Mm-hmm. And so you have to find a way the characters still themselves and they're still being genuine to that without changing it. Or you also get issues like, I saw a movie with this recently. It wasn't good. Yes, I have a problem where I will actively block out not good things from my memory. I'm like, where if I'm trying to remember something, someone's like, "Oh yeah," I'm like, "Yeah, I saw that. I don't remember a thing of it, so I didn't like it."
Right.
Yeah. But I'm sure you could probably think of many examples when I say it. But the issue where the character does a sudden action that doesn't make any sense at all, but you're like, "Oh, they needed to do that for the story to take its next step."
I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate
Plot
that.
devices. I
Yes.
hate that mess.
And so, yeah,
It's like the writer saying, "Hey, look, the story needs to go this way, and so I'm making the character do this."
and so that's kind of where I'm thinking of when I say creating the theme or creating the motif is you have your thematic devices or your motifs in the background. So when you're creating a character in the first place and you're doing your scene breakdown, your character bible, all that, you think like, all right, how does it tie in with this motif that I'm thinking about? So
Right.
it doesn't happen. And that's why a lot of really good. It's very exemplified in young adult fiction, but where when you think about a story, like this would not exist without any other hero. Like this person needs to be this one for this job, and Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, very
Right.
clearly Luke's story, but it's done in such a way that's great, and Vader is the perfect mirror. And the way it works out, but it's all because Lucas was kind of neurotic when he was writing that, and he had a giant motif board, and most of it was Seven Samurai, but he had a giant motif and theme board where he's going back. He's like, this is everything that ties back into, like, everything that happens is tied back into my initial thoughts here for the concept and where my brain is going. Where it's like, all right, Space Samurai.
I
Okay.
love Seven Samurai. It's
Yes.
one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
I don't see that in Star Wars. I just don't.
It's very interesting the way that he did that, because he said it's very. He said Lucas had said that he originally was trying to do a Kurosawa film in space. And so you can see it, like, and that's actually we got Vader's helmet design. It was originally a samurai helmet design. Then they,
I can see that.
yeah, they then spray painted black. But the idea of like, that's why the saber duels in the first trilogy were so like tame compared to the prequels later on, is because it's supposed to be Aido. It's just the art of the single strike, or just Kendo, where they're just holding it and then striking.
Right. Yeah.
And,
Interesting.
Yeah. And
I never knew that.
yeah, it's real interesting, but
I love Seven Samurai.
yeah. They did a comic that's Lucas's original screenplay. It is a fever trip. It is a fever dream of a acid trip. But if you can, it's good. But you definitely see it a lot more in that. But when you actually like see all the things put together and you watch it through, you're like, oh, I see where he pulled this motif from, or I see where he got the thematic component from. But it's the idea where he was his actual crafting of the story was his concept. Here's what's cool. Here's how it works. And then by the end, he got to the end of it, and that's when he's like, "There's more to this here. I could talk a lot about, hope and fate and all this other stuff."
Right.
And then that's why he wrote the next two in the series, and then eventually got the first one made. I think Aaron actually said that he was able to find a digital copy of like wasn't called Star Wars. I think it was something. It was the something cycle and the saga of the Wills, because the Wills were the original Star Wars space gods. Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
But if you kind of delve deep into that, understanding the creative process behind it, you see that there was a lot of creating to theme, but not to like an actual like literary theme, but to a motif, the muse style of theme, where and it just kept on bouncing back to that, and that's how he kept it so tied together for that original trilogy, and for a lot of the early Legends stuff, and was able to keep all the characters honest to themselves, but still had a high emphasis on adventure and exploration.
Cool. Yeah. I didn't know that. Yeah, if anybody's listening and has not seen Seven Samurai, go watch it now.
Oh my gosh.
After the stream is over,
Yes.
but then go watch it.
Yes.
Oh.
Or if you're listening to us on demand or on a podcast, we can pause us, come back
Pause
to
it,
us.
pause it, and then come back. Right?
Yeah, type in the comments what you thought.
Fellas, I hate to do this. I got a bail on you. I got class in the morning, and I'm already a little bit beat, so I need to get into bed.
And
Thanks for letting me hang out with y'all.
Thanks for joining us,
Quentin.
Oh, we enjoyed it.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll catch you next time.
Good night, Mr. Rowland.
So, again, this is a show
Man,
on
I thought
Tuesday.
he'd never leave.
All right. This is a show on Tuesday. I am Tim TK, your host, joined by Quentin Bedwell. Roland Mandel's with us for the first hour and 10. So we are talking about creating to theme or motif or, any sort of repeated idea or phrase that or concept that you want to hit back on in your creative work. So obviously, just due to the nature of things, Roland and I spend a lot of time talking about writing, since that is our shtick. Yes, and Quentin, you yourself are also a writer and creator, so you also talked about your initial creative process. But I don't know if we got into the art side of things, so I'd be interested to see how motif or theme or anything like that would affect maybe palette choices or like line thickness, if that's something you consider, or if you let it sit at all, or if you just kind of have your style and you know what works for you.
Well, it really does depend on what. For instance, if I'm a very gritty artist.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to get a little less gritty when it comes to stuff like sci-fi or anything that's supposed to be futuristic, or stuff that's supposed to be clean and sharp. I try to make it clean and sharp.
Yeah.
If it's horror, if it's just a really rough kind of story or fantasy, I go really not when I say fantasy, I mean kind of darker fantasy, not really the whimsical fantasy.
Yeah.
You know,
More
I don't really do whimsical fantasy. I
uh,
just don't.
more
Not for
Warhammer,
me.
less Sword of the less Legend of Zelda.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Then I put that grit in there, and grit meaning little extra lines. I wear everything down, give it just little dots here and there. I just literally stipple in different places, and that's really my true love to do stuff like that. Now, if I'm doing something a little more realistic, something I'll say if I were working on, and I have before worked on a story that is more present day sci-fi, but more X-Filesy, or a large aspect of it was X-Filesy, then I was kind of a little bit more clean, less gritty, less dots, lines, little hooly danders here and there. So there's that. As far as color's usually the last thing that I hit. And it for some people it's the first thing. They're picking palettes and all that kind of stuff. I am not. I'm an illustrator, so I am focusing on lines and shapes and structures. Like if you look at some of the new stuff I'm doing with Nightrise, there's a lot of sharp angles and a lot of grit and grime.
Oh yeah.
That's just not something that would carry over to a lot of other stuff. If I was doing a superhero comic, I would kind of take a little bit of that out until you hit battle scenes or something, So yeah, I mean, it definitely does play a role. Now, if you were to have like a fantasy that was a little brighter and less dark, I might kind of, not be so gritty with it. But yeah, that's how it affects me. But for the most part, usually I am wanting to do something cool, something that I like, something that other people would think, look at it and say, man, that is awesome looking, and I'll do whatever is in my head to get there, So, I don't have any rules. I don't have any, I kind of wish I did in some things, I wish I had a SOP on, well, this is this kind of story, and this is, this and this, so we're going to do this list of things. I wish I was organized like that, but I really have to just let it flow, because that's just, that's just the way I do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes I will draw stuff a few different times until I get it where I feel like, this is the right look for this. Even in Nightrise, I did it a couple times and when I was doing the concept art, I went through a little bit, on one piece of concept art, it was a little this way, a little gritty, and on this one it was a little less gritty, and on this one it was a little darker, a lot of deep shadows, and I just kind of played with it as I was doing the concept art, and I kind of finally, after about 10 or 12 pieces of concept art, I had it where I felt like this is the spirit of the art that's going to be on here. So
Yeah.
most all my art looks, you can tell just like my handwriting that it was me, but it may be a little different in that regard. Line weights, light, dark, and texture. I
Yeah.
guess you'd say texture.
Absolutely. I do notice that just something that I just kind of pass through is that even if artists don't necessarily mention that they thought about line weight, you like subconsciously, just by like if they've been exposed to the story material before, and that absolutely does change just from tone to
I
tone.
think so, yeah. Yeah, it's not something that I think about. I think it's subconscious, really, and when I'm doing the other stuff. Well, if it's really bright, you're gonna the rule is, and this is just an art rule, you know, when you're doing lines, the if you're drawing, say, an arm, the top of the arm line is going to be thinner than the bottom, or wherever the light is shining on the object. It's going to be thinner. And wherever the light is being shadowed is going to be thicker. So even if you don't put a deep shadow here under the arm, you're still going to have that, you know, thick line under there. But you know, when you get when you're doing a real gritty, dark story and everything is kind of dark, even those lines kind of thicken up, you know, all over. So you're right. Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, and something I kind of noticed with Rocky Kim and I forgot his name. Not because I didn't like his art, because I actually really liked his art, but I haven't read too much of his stuff. But he did the IDW. He did the art for IDW adaptation of Metal Gear Solids 1 and 2. But something else I kind of noticed, and also the artwork for Department of Truth. But something else I kind of noticed is that I think this is more so on the editor's choice, but going from something that is clear-cut to something that is a bit more mysterious or vague in the style of story. It's like with your superhero comics, traditionally you see a lot of very clean lines, vibrant colors with high contrast, just a lot of things that really kind of, and the image file might even be hit with like a couple sharpness filters. But when you're doing something that is a bit more mysterious, you may see more jagged lines, almost looks kind of sketchy, where the lines actually come off of the profile of whatever they're drawing. Or
I like that style too, and I have done that. I love that style. I love the little kind of scratchy, you know, look.
Yeah.
It really catches my eye a lot.
I like that, and then also as a painter who may be dabbling into color at some point in the near future. We'll see how that goes. It might be fun.
But I mean, you wouldn't you wouldn't use that. I mean, you could if you were good and you tested it a few times. You wouldn't use that to doing a Star Trek comic, you know.
No, yeah,
you know.
And unless it was maybe something like a Deep Space Nine style, like Mystery on the Thing, where it's like where there may not be a whole lot of physical, like point to point action, but there's a lot of emotional action, and so you kind of want to portray that in like how the colors get done or how everyone presents. Because we don't have live action actors, so we can't capture all the emotions in their face in real time. So you have to capture a still and then use the rest of the frame to flesh that out. And so I think also a really strong use of color theory if you're a nerd, or just color composition if you're a bit practical. We're knowing how to create gradients or how to pair those contrasts or lack thereof to really kind of either sharpen something or draw it out.
Me and color, it's just the last thing I do. It's the last thing usually that I think of. Very rarely will I go into something and know immediately, you know, this is definitely, you know, navies and royals, and, you know, this is definitely all cool colors, warm colors. I know how to use color. I know darker areas, cooler colors, lighter areas, warmer colors, and so on. But it's just not my thing. You know, I would much rather see a colorist color my work than me color it.
Right.
Because, man, you know, they can do stuff that's like their wheelhouse, you know, and all of their feelings and everything is tied to that, and their intuition, you know. My intuition is lines, shape, structures, object, I know all that stuff, but theirs is more of the color side, and I'm just not as strong there, and I've tried to be, but I'm just not as interested in it, you know. So I find myself a lot of times with color, I render out a lot of my stuff instead of doing. I know how to professionally color. I've studied it enough that I do know how to do the lasso tool and do the, you know, set your brush to screen and all that stuff. I know how to do all that, and I know how to do like two or three different ways. But what I end up doing because I'm an illustrator is, and some people don't like this type of coloring, but I end up rendering most of my coloring. Like I will lay the flats, and then I'll go in and I'll start painting that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, because it's just, I'm an illustrator, and that's what I like to do. But I, and it looks good, but it doesn't look like something that you would see in a comic a lot of time.
Yeah. If I were to be like again, because my wheelhouse is like in painting. Like if I was to actually color something, I'd for sure be the colors that everyone like hates to work with because it take forever. But I'd be like straight up like, all right, give me like the prints, and we're doing this on acrylics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think we're kind of getting into a point where we're about ready to actually get ready to wrap up. I think we had a good conversation so far. So I think we can do those, talk about what perhaps our takeaway is, at least what I got as what our takeaway might be, is that creating the theme, what you're actually doing more so is creating to more motif or concept, and that your themes are actually going to come out later. But when you are creating to those motifs or concepts, you want to have a very strong kind of pre-planned area just to so everything is in line. You're not doing anything out of the ordinary. So does that sound about what you got of it as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I'm glad I actually got to mention the stuff about the message-driven stories that start. I haven't really thought about that or put it into words, but I was glad it came up and I was able to actually say that, because that's such a thing. There's a lot of writers out there that they like to give messages, instead of coming out. And really, you could sum their whole story up in, just a sentence that they're trying to say.
Yeah.
But they've used it. And sometimes, it's great, but it's great for them. But,
See,
it's not my bag.
Yeah, a good writer that's really good at writing, but also has strong messaging is, I'm probably going to butcher his name, Ta-Nehisi Coates. He wrote Black Panther for a while. He has also done some X-Men, some other stuff. But he has such strong concepts and everything. Like by the end of it, you're like, it's one of those things right at the end of it, you're like, oh, I get the theme. But during it, you're so wrapped up in the adventure and the characters that it just kind of, you absorb everything.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's entertainment. It's amusement. Without muse being thinking. Amusement. That's what it's for. It's to make you not think. And, to me, it just pulls me out of the immersion of the story.
Yes.
When somebody's telling me some, and I really do believe you should have messaging or messages of, a moral in your stories. I definitely do, but I just, there's a lot of different writers with a lot of different views, and I really hate for a story, a comic, or a movie to be ruined for me because somebody got a little too, too messagey, and, so that's just...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think...
I think if you're doing it right...
Oh, man, where'd it go?
They should be able to get the story, but you should be really subtle with it to where, it's in there, but it's not really what the whole thing, is about.
Well, it's like the Matrix. Everyone considers it to be like, one of the deepest movies to come out of the late 90s or 2000s action scene. Have some of the deepest messaging and the most complex themes.
The most parodied, the most copied, the most.
Yes. But the siblings who did it.
I can't remember their names. I always have trouble with their names.
Was it with a W? Wow, I'm forgetting every name today. I remember Ta-Nehisi Coates, but I can't remember them. But anyway, when they talked about it, they're like, that stuff was all inferred by the audience. Like, we wanted to tell a story about computers and people in them.
Yeah. And you know, you can just kind of have an idea of how that talk went.
Yeah.
Man, wouldn't it be cool if you were doing your daily life, and all of a sudden this guy, you know, you start just noticing little things here and there, and then all of a sudden this guy comes to you and says, "Hey, dude, this is all a program."
Yeah.
But he doesn't tell you all, you know, all at once, and you have to figure it out. And then, you know, see, that's what I'm talking about. That's how great stories start out. They're so, you know, they start with an awesome concept, awesome idea, and, you know, something that's going to keep somebody tied in for the whole show, you know, or it's whatever the story is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That.
All right. Well, this has been a show on Tuesday. I've been your host, Tim TK, associate editor at Silverline, writer, creator of Wolf Hunter, writer, co-creator of something coming to you in a space-time relative to your mass and energy. And as always, joined by Mr. Quentin Bedwell.
Yes. Quentin Bedwell, you can, I am a penciler inker. You can find my stuff on Facebook right now. I've been posting a lot of stuff for Nightrise, because I'm working on that in the background, and also some other unmentionables. And I've also got a game called Relic Quest on GameCrafter.com that you can go over and purchase. It's an open beta. Eventually, one day I'll have the time to make the few little corrections that it needs, and it'll be out of open beta. But it is a fully working game, ready to play. Good game. We play it all the time here. Go check it out. Also on DeviantArt, QJB. I am on TikTok, but I do not post anything on TikTok at the moment.
I need to post more stuff on TikTok.
Instagram, Quentin Bedwell or Quentin J. Bedwell. And you can also Google my name and see some of my previous work for different IPs.
There you go. If you Google my name, you get a current ESPN sportscaster, so don't bother with that. But
yeah,
at Tim TK Writer.
Great quality IPs like College Girls versus Zombies.
Ooh. All right.
10 years ago.
Wow.
I saw that on my feed the other day. I was like, wow. My publicist didn't do enough to get that out off my
it's a different time of
away
life.
from me. Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, we will be back on our streamings tomorrow for Wednesday Wham, and again on Sunday for Silver Sunday, and we'll be back here next week on Tuesday, where we'll talk about I don't know, cryptids, maybe Sasquatch.
You never know.
You never know.
I want to talk more about ghosts eventually, especially when it gets closer to October.
Absolutely, we're for sure. I mean, this is my show, so October is just gonna be spooky month. We're like, I'm creating a custom frame for the show. It's gonna be great.
Oh yeah, maybe even a little cosplay involved. You never know. Some Halloween costumes. Come on.
I do have a Sub-Zero cosplay upstairs still that I think I still fit into.
Well, I've got some helmets and stuff, some battle armor that I've made, some foam builds. Yeah.
Let's go. Alrighty, well, we will see you next week, and remember, until then, make mine
silver.